Let me introduce you to Redum. I mean, you might already know them because they're an absolute art god, but I'm going to be studying their work. There are a lot of unique techniques and cool effects Redum likes to use, on top of just amazing composition and incredible storytelling in their work. So by studying their paintings, hopefully I can at least capture a smidgen of Redum's skill. Other than Redum's incredible compositions, immediately the first thing I notice is how they use the presence and absence of lines. In many of Redum's paintings, you'll notice the use of hard outlines on shapes, like here in the flowers, here in the leaves in the background, and here there is clearly a very pronounced outline on those tree branches. That tree is also a photo texture, but we'll get into that later. Anyways, these outlines give the piece a little bit of crispiness and a sharp stylistic look. To do this in Photoshop, all you gotta do is just right click on a layer, select blending options, and tick stroke. Then you can mess with all the property sliders to your liking. However, your boy uses Procreate, so it's a little bit more intimate and involved process on there, but I'll show you how to do it when we actually get to the damn painting. On top of having very pronounced outlines that go around entire subjects, the subtle ones are just as crispy and impactful in Redum's artwork. Looking back at these paintings, notice how here, on the side of the figure, there's a subtle outline in her hair and face, but on the other side, that outline is nowhere to be seen. Yeah, and I'd like to apologize for that, but anyways, here there's the outline on the mailbox stand, no outline on the mailbox. Outline, no outline. Outline, no outline. You get the point. In painting, when you have this level of variance, this variety of where stylistic elements are found, I personally think you just get 1,000 times more interesting piece to look at. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more theoretical. A little art understander. Oh, I see you about to click off the video. Stop it. Stop it right now, man. You gotta swallow your art theory soup before you actually start painting. But don't worry, we'll get to the juicy rendering techniques and effects after this. But I promise, this little art understander is important. If composition and lines are 1 and 2 in things I noticed about Redum's work, Redum's use of lighting and color is 1.5 and 2.5 respectively. What the f*** is that analogy? So let's start off with color. In a lot of Redum story pieces, I found that when you squint, you'll observe that there's basically only 2 main colors. One color that occupies like 70% of the painting, and another color that occupies the 30%. In some pieces like this one, that 30% is quite saturated and emphasizes its presence in the piece. But if you get the color harmonies just right, sometimes the color doesn't even need that extra bit of saturation or brightness. The color harmonies just speak for themselves. In some pieces, Redum actually even adds an extra bit of spice by adding a third color following the triadic color scheme. Most frequently, the good old red, blue, and green. Okay, next up in the understander list is lighting. I mean, there's not much to say other than that's that. Okay, no, but seriously, Redum's lighting is very shape-oriented, and there are usually very clear distinctions between light and dark shapes. This is called key lighting. I mean, there's the strong, bold key lights that are one thing, but even in the lighting scenarios where there isn't that drastic of a value change, you can still find those sharp, light, dark distinctions as shown in these paintings here. Okay, with all the explainers out of the way, let's actually start painting. First, I actually get an actual sketch down, but since I mostly just want to focus on rendering and such topics, I basically just took elements from different paintings of Redum's and smushed them together like that bad collage you made for your 8th grade English assignment. So like I basically ransacked this redheaded girly, her dress, then mixed the leaves / garden hedges thingies from these 2 paintings for the foreground, slapped a fence, bird, and some nice big clouds to round out the composition. See, this is what they mean by steal like an artist. Oh, but don't worry, because I added a nice large tree and some hedge conifers, so take that, you plagiarism merchants. Anyways, after I get the sketch done, I decided not to do the line art and try and get away with adding the line art later in the process because I'm a lazy git who needs to lay down some colors or else my brain goes Alt F4 and just quit the painting overall. Getting the basics color down and removing all the white bits on a page is like drinking coffee right before you launch a wide-scale attack on the public washroom. And as you get more colors down, the tension eases on your buttocks, and you are now greatly more prepared to head off to the toilet than you did without the coffee. I mean, heck, the entirety of the front grass / flower thingamabob section is going to be replaced later on. But for now, to ease my art anxiety, these early shapes and textures are mostly just a guide before I vanquish them to the shadow realm and repaint over them, actually focusing on the strokes and shapes I lay down that time. As you can see, at this stage I finally decided to be a big boy and start refining the line work on the character. Still not the cleanest of lines, but they'll do for now. Okay, now we can actually get to the refining part. The first thing I start with is the clouds because I like to work from front to back. I start defining the shape with a nice bright white outline where the cloud forms the brightest. I made sure to have cloud references from Redum's work so that I could better copy their shape language. One thing you should keep in mind is to make sure you have multiple layers for painting each object. I mean, the cloud is a simple object, so I only have two, one for the bulk of the mass and then a layer on top of that for the bright edges. But the reason to do this is because Redum loves to have smooth gradients in the shadow. And if everything is in one layer, then it becomes borderline impossible to add gradients in the shadow later on. Like for example, later on when I'm painting her dress, I make sure to have the dark shadow and the dress patterns on separate layers so that I can easily add a nice hint of purple on the far side without interfering with the pattern lines. Oh, and while we're here, I might as well add that the in-between spots where light and dark shapes are touching are great areas to add that extra color gradient, so keep that in the back of the noggin. After the clouds, I reshape the hedges, add some more detail to the tree using texture brushes, turn the leaves red, and then also start shaping the front plant stalks. And yeah, that's what those are called, plant stalks. The first plan of action was to get rid of the horrid base that I put down and then use a mix of nifty plant brushes that I got, which I believe are from Devin L. Kurt's plant pack, to build out my kingdom of plants. I think in total there were like 4 layers all stacked on top of one another. So like there was the stalks layer, some leaves layer, some smaller leaves and buds, something like that. Again, they're on separate layers so that it's easy to adjust specific sections. But also, one thing I forgot to mention is that having them on separate layers also means that you can get more outlines when you do the outline trick. Like if this section of plants were all put on one layer, the outline would be less poppin' because, well, the outline follows the edges of one layer. So when you all have them on separate layers, you get these like overlapping lines over different plants, which is what we want. Next thing to get banished to the shadow realm is the grass. The flowers got eradicated and I just simplified the brush strokes to a couple of horizontal lines. Then here in the fence posts, I add that absence of outlines I was talking about. I started out only adding highlights and small markings here and there, and then adding the outline over the entire fence post shape. Okay, now that we've actually gone to that point, let me finally show you how to make the outline in Procreate. Like I said before, outlining in Procreate is a little bit more involved, and we're gonna have to do a little digital art trickery. So what you first want to do is duplicate your layer and then select the pixels on the bottom layer by holding 2 fingers on that layer. Select color fill and increase the feather amount to what you want. Then exit the selection tool and then click it again with the color fill still on and click automatic. Then you're going to want to select the shapes you want to add the solid line to, and finally you can drag your pen over the shape to adjust the thickness. I actually learned this trick from Genevieve Design Studio on YouTube for this trick, so big ups to her. And yeah, you can see that outline is just so crispy, man. Oh, I love it. After adding some slight detail to the hedge conifers and adding outlines on them, it was time. I feel like I've got a good baseline for the background, and now I should start painting in the redhead. Since she was the focus of the piece, I didn't really mess around and lollygag and focus on shape language right from the get-go. I mean, just in the hair itself, there's like a ton of detail and shape language that I gotta capture from Redum's pieces. But since the pose on the piece is similar to this piece here that Redum did, I was sort of able to follow the flow of the hair strands, which made it so much easier to capture some of Redum's style. And by that, I mean it was as good as taking Tylenol to help with some cocaine addiction. I don't even know if that analogy works, but the point is, that shit was hard, man! There was just so much detail to try and capture, and I was extremely overwhelmed. I mean, you might have noticed that the tree leaf color just like changed 4 times, and halfway through I increased the saturation of the entire painting, but I just kept pushing through it slowly, and I'd take little breaks here and there to help my heart, but still stressful nonetheless. Looking back, I think the optimal way to render is to start out with a gradient of colors all soft around, and then start shaping some specific color blocks onto certain parts of the hair. What I ended up doing was just shaping and coloring at the same exact time. In terms of layers, I had a color for the base, and then I had a layer on top of that where I defined some shadow shapes. Since the right side of the hair was more flowy, the colors would have a nice softer gradient, but on the left side, since the hair was more linear in flow, the shadow shapes and colors were more distinct and blocky. Still, I made sure to have some sharp physics bending hair strands on both sides to add some organicness to the hair flow. Once I felt comfortable enough, I got rid of the line art and started adding in outlines manually on parts of the hair. I know they can be very crispy and satisfying to add, but make sure to not overdo the outlining. Remember, it's the presence and absence that makes Redum's line so sensational. Anyways, I finally gained the ability to see and realized that the noggin was way too large. My brother is actually stunning how I didn't notice her head was the same size as Megamind. Anyways, at this point in the hair process, it was mostly just refining hair strands and also just softening up areas as well. Because like I said before, it was very easy to overdo the line thing. You might have noticed that the face was done very simply with literally just a light color and a shadow color, and that's pretty much it. Most of the complexity and brain power was literally focused on the hair. You also might have noticed that somewhere during the great hair rendering of 23 that I outlined all the plant stalks. I was debating whether or not I should remove some of them because there were a lot of outlines, but I ended up just keeping all of them and adding some bright outlines in some sections. I think it works because some areas of the outlines are almost the exact same value as the plant stalk itself, so it's not as noticeable and a lot more subtle. Anyways, I added the bird, which I had an extremely hard time with. What's new? And so I'm just basically going to skip past that and move on to the flowers. To start off, I was literally painting in eggs as the basic shapes. I mean, look at these. They are looking scrumptious. But sadly, eggs do not grow on plants, so they needed to be shaped into flower petals. And to shape them, what I actually did was overextend an outline past the base petal and then fill in the gap with the shadow color, which was genius because I got a nice solid outline and I get a clean shadow shape in the process. Who says art isn't for intellectuals? I went pretty line heavy on the flowers, and I think it sort of deviated away from how Redum did theirs, but I think it's still pretty cool how I adjusted them, so I kept them just the way they were. Oh, and finally, one last thing. Tree. This is what the final painting ended up looking like, and looking back on the drawing, there's still a lot of things to improve. I mean, firstly, the bird is in an absolute shocking state. Good God, man! But I also feel like my shape language wasn't as clean as Redum's. The structure of the face isn't that great. I mean, that has nothing to do with the study. I just smell. I only noticed like after 90% of the painting was done, and so I was like, no shot, I'm even attempting to fix that deep in. But I think there was also a lot of things to like. Even though the composition is literally just a hodgepodge of different Redum paintings, the way the colors work together, the flowers, the fence post, and tree looks pretty alright to me. But I also learned an absolute boatload of information non-consensually. Just the sheer amount of hours I put into this painting meant I was getting blasted with new knowledge, forcefully. If you made it all the way to the end, GG too easy, good job. But as a reward, I actually want to be talking about a little giveaway that I'm going to be running. Yes, kind of crazy. Me and XPPEN have actually partnered up to give away their tablet, the Deco MW pen tablet. The details of the giveaway are really easy. Just follow XPPEN on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And for me, make sure you follow me on Instagram and comment giveaway on my most recent post on there. Alrighty, good luck. With that said, hopefully you enjoyed the vid and give me your forehead. Good God, man!